So I think at the beginning of this process, until the findings of the investigation, the cases were still in progress. I think there was some advice to organisations to wait for the outcome of investigations and cases, but several organisations haven't waited and have either suspended people or terminated their contracts. And so a question from the chat box is, does the NMC have any influence with organisations so that they don't do this and wait for cases to be, wait for the final outcome?
I can take that one, Felicia. Thank you. I saw a couple of questions around that. So from the very start, we've urged organisations to support the nurses and the applicants to watch and wait and not take this action. The NMC can't tell employers what to do, but we can keep influencing their position, and we can have some direct conversations just to question and ask and clarify whenever we can about the process. I think this has been as confusing for some employers as it has been for everyone else, and it's as it's unfolded. If there are organisations that we feel that have been really inequitable in their approach, then my team will have specific conversations with them. So, Felicia, Wendy, if the people on the call wanted to raise any particular concerns about a particular organisation, then I'd be happy to have a follow-up conversation. But we can't directly tell an employer, you must do this or you must do that. But we'll certainly work hard to clarify positioning and to rehearse some of the conversations that we've had and that Pamela and Roxanne and Sam have outlined today.
Okay. For questions, we just know from experience and from our previous meetings that when we've opened the meeting, a person has maybe, because they have been quite anxious, they want to know the information. They've talked about 20 minutes and we've lost some of the space and time within the meeting. So what we're going to do is that we are going to ask you to post your questions and queries in the chat box. We will then hand that over to representatives for the NMC, and we will go through the chat box and answer. They will respond to your queries. And before we go to the NMC representatives, you can ask any question. The questions that they can respond to, they will respond to. And if you have your cameras on, can you make sure that you're not doing things in the camera and in the background, because it can be a bit distracting for other people. And I think we're going to proceed with the session now. We welcome you, and I'm going to hand over now to members of the NMC. So can I start with Samantha?
Thank you, Felicia. I'll speak again in a moment, but just to introduce myself, my name is Sam Foster. I'm the Exec Nurse Director at the NMC here, and I'm currently, taking a role like a Chief Nurse would in overseeing the work that the team are doing to progress the work that we need to do to support the investigations into this particular issue. Let me pass next to Roxanne.
Hello everyone, I'm Roxanne Burns. I'm the Assistant Director for the CBT work, so working with the team internally and with our stakeholders, making sure that people are up to date and have all the information they need. Thank you. Over to Sandy, please.
Hi everyone, my name's Sam Donoghue. I'm an Assistant Nurse Director at the NMC, working closely with Roxanne and Sam, and I have specific roles supporting and talking to employers with the team that I've got across the UK.
Thank you. I'll go next. My name's Pamela Mania. I am a lawyer in the registration investigation team. My role has been in both the registrants and appellants' processes for registration. I'll pass over to Lindsay.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Lindsay White. I'm one of the lawyers in the registration investigation team, working with and also working with Rox on various subjects. I hope you find useful today.
Alicia, are you happy for me to just frame and just get going on our briefing? So, again, thank you very much for taking some time out on a Friday evening to join us again. And you know, a lot's happened since we last met, and we've learned a lot. So the real aim of today is to share some information, info to update you since the last time we spoke, information around, I guess, myth-busting some things that we feel is really important to give you some facts. But we really want to spend most of our time answering the questions that you pose in the chat box. Outside of here, we can share more information, we can share written information, so really anything that we can do to support colleagues with the information that they need. I guess one of the first things that I want to acknowledge is since we last met, we've had the publication of the Independent Culture Review of the NMC. And like yourselves, you'll be aware of how it feels when the spotlight's on you, whether that's your service or your whole organisation. And the spotlight is very much on us at the NMC around the very difficult culture in which we're operating in, the criticisms that have been levied on us around how we handle cases. And we still have one more report to come towards the end of this month, which will focus very much on handling of cases around safeguarding sexual misconduct and racism. So there's a big spotlight on the NMC. And I think, you know, on a personal level, you need to make a decision as to whether you want to be part of that improvement or whether really it's too much and you need to leave the organisation. But I wanted to say that my colleagues on this call, you know, have very much made a personal, active decision to stay and be part of the NMC, to continue to do the work that we're doing. Really think about putting people at the centre of this, and we spend a lot of time together talking about the impact that processes like this have on people. Sam and I are registered nurses, and I've been referred to the NMC myself. I know how this feels. So we talk a lot about handling people as individuals and supporting them and recognising the impact that's having. We're recognising the timeliness of this process. So it's important that we come back together to update you so that there are no delays on either side that are avoidable. Also really cognizant that actually having this conversation with us, although we want to create a safe space, actually safe space and the NMC are two phrases that might not feel comfortable for you, but we do very much want to create an environment where we can share information as we can, that you can pose any question to us and that we can come back to you. But I just wanted to recognise and acknowledge and take the accountability for the criticisms that have been levied to the NMC over previous months, but to commit to you that we will continue to work to ensure that you're at the centre and we'll continue to assess the impact of everything that we do. So, as I say, we've got colleagues on this call that will be able to answer questions that you pose, questions about employers, and about signposting you to information that you might not be aware of that the NMC has. But the intention is really not to cause further harm. So anything that you think will be beneficial, then please do pop that in the chat box. I'm going to hand over initially to Roxanne, who's going to give you an update on information that we've got now at the NMC since last time we met, and just some other factual information that we'd like to share with you whilst you get your questions started in the chat box there. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. So I think I'll start us off by sharing what we know now that we didn't know a year ago, and what we didn't know when we held our last webinar with you all. And so we know now that 17 professionals, that's 16 people that have applied to join their register, and one registrant have told us about their involvement in using proxies at UNIC. Some suggest it was an active decision, others suggest it was something that unfortunately they were unduly pressurised to do. We know that some payments were taken, and it was often under duress. And it's this new context of what actually was happening at the Unic Test Centre.
Before and will apply in the same way. So it's a very
and instead, the panel found that 164 applications that have been refused by the registrar, and they've been refused because they haven't satisfied the assistant registrar, often due to in some cases, lack of detailed reflection in the reflective accounts, lack of detailed accounts of what happened and their involvement in fraud, lack of reassurances that if faced with something similar, they could act differently, or lack of inclusion of their employer in the admission and reflections. It's worth saying that just to say that you reflected and that you won't do again, it needs to be persuasive and genuine and in your own words, and we can elaborate a little bit about what we mean by that a little bit further on. We've got some guidance that we can point you to. For those registrants for whom we had concerns about fraud, there have been 9 hearings that have taken place so far. For 7 of those cases, fraudulent entry was found proven, and those individuals have been removed from the register. In 2 of those cases, fraud wasn't found proven, and instead the panel found that it was an incorrect entry in both cases. But because the individuals had already taken and passed their CBT, they were allowed to remain on the register and no further action was taken. We are scheduling now all the remaining hearings, and we have the next one coming up on the confirmed to be on the 7th of November, and for all of those whose cases are waiting to be heard, they're all starting to be scheduled in accordance with everybody's availability. So if you have representation, your representatives are available, they're all starting to be scheduled now. We're expecting the majority of the registrants' cases to be heard over the next 3 to 4 months. I'm going to hand you over now, Sam, just to elaborate a little bit on the reflective accounts and the safe spaces. Actually, if it's okay, I'm going to ask Pam just to talk about the reflective accounts and the signposting that we can do. And then I'll come back on safe spaces if that's okay, Pam.
Thanks, Sam. So what do we mean when we're talking about reflective and reflections? This really impacts those of you who are applicants and you have made an application to join the NMC register. When you have a complete application, because you have sat a new CBT, that application will be considered by the assistant registrar. You will be invited to provide your comments and any reflections to the assistant registrar, who will consider any information that you provide at that stage. Now, in terms of the accounts that you give to the assistant registrar, that is something that has to be genuine and from you directly. That is not something that we can provide you with words to say. The accounts that you give to the assistant registrar ought to be in your own words and true to the experience that you had at Unic. Once you've given an account and provided any supporting documentation for the assistant registrar to consider, you can also at the same time give your reflections. Reflections you will be familiar with the expectations from the code of practice and the expectations on you as a nurse on how you should behave, how you should look back on your actions and conduct. So that is what we mean when we're talking about reflections. Again, as I said before, it's not something that we can give you a method or an approach to what you should say with the specifics, but we do have guidance on the NMC website. I'm happy to circulate the link to that guidance in the appropriate platform. And the guidance that we have on the website is specifically for reflections in relation to readmission onto the register. For some of you, that might not be the stage of your application, but the contents of the guidance will apply in the same way. So it's a very useful tool to refer yourselves to have a look at what the website says and to try and apply some of those tips and answer some of those questions that are meant to be as a guide to assist individuals to provide their reflections. I do want to give some reassurances that this particular website has been useful and positive for some applicants, because working within the registration investigation team, I have circulated this guidance before, and there are those who have utilised it and found it helpful and positive in their own reflections and returning to the AR for consideration. Within the reflections, we would the AR would expect to read how the applicants are reflecting on the conduct and how it may have impacted their decisions or their conduct even after the UNIC experience. So it's not just looking back at what happened at UNIC, but also, steps taken, lessons learned, things done during the NMC's investigation, and how you may have interacted with the NMC as well after the conclusion of the investigation, or any previous contacts that you might have had with the NMC as well. I hope that's helpful for the time being, Sam, but I'm happy to add anything further if need be.
I think it's so helpful, and even for those of us that haven't heard that before, just as registrants, it's really helpful. I just wanted to just briefly talk about safe spaces or speaking up. So look, one of the key functions of the NMC is to investigate concerns if they're raised about nurses or midwives, and that's why we find ourselves here, because we, in law, have a duty to investigate concerns that were raised, which is where this all started. That a concern was raised that on the balance of probability, it was more likely than not that there was fraudulent activity. As Roxanne says, now we know and we have evidence that the context of some of that fraudulent activity was either, as Rox said, in the knowledge of, or more concerning, under duress or coercion. Now, when we look at our code and think, what are the elements that we need to consider? As a registrant myself, I've got a big safeguarding responsibility at the NMC, and that's something that we're really trying to strengthen. So there's a safeguarding element where we need to consider the context of safeguarding any applicant or registrant that might have been coerced or pressurised into being part of this proxy testing. We've also all got an obligation to escalate concerns and to speak with candour. You may or may not know, I'm happy to be really open. I have been a whistleblower as a registrant, so I know how difficult that feels, and I know what an impact that has when you're raising concerns. I also know that you can't do these things on your own, so I think it's just really important to just take stock and think about who's around that could support you with this. We've got colleagues from the association, we've got colleagues who are representing you from a variety of different representative bodies. We've got your employers, if you're fortunate enough to have a supportive employer. I just wanted to just take stock and think there are many people around that can support you in how you need to consider working under your code to be candid and escalate concerns when you know that there's something that you need to share that will reflect on your character. So, just really important to say it is terribly difficult to raise concerns. We acknowledge that. But I think now we've got the evidence base that concerns are really valid to be raised, and we've got an evidence base that actually colleagues that are supported, that reflect, as Pam says, within the guidance, on that end-to-end basis. Actually, as Felicia and Wendy were saying to us after, we need to leave this call that there is some hope that people are having their applications progressed and returning to the register by taking that brave decision to speak up and be candid and use their code to guide them in how we behave as professionals. So I just wanted to say, take a moment to think, you all have got people around you. It's really important that we speak up. And it's about, as Pam said, how that really rounds you as a professional in the role that you're doing now. And it's never too late, and it's not uncommon to not speak up immediately, but to just take some time to reflect and think, I really need to do this now. And I think, as Rox has said, a group of people have taken that brave decision, and they set the stall out really that gives you the opportunity to continue with your application and to continue with your application to reapply to go back onto the register. So I just wanted to make that comment. Rox, I think you're going to give us a bit more info. I just can't see any questions in the inbox in the box though. So you've obviously got your WhatsApp groups. If there's any technical issues or anything, but we do want to give plenty of time for questions. We'll keep filling with info, but the minute we start seeing questions, then we'll move across to answering the questions that you've got.
Thanks, Sam. Just one point that Sam's made that I just really want to underline for you all is that being involved, having taken your test at the UNIC Test Centre isn't the end of the world. It doesn't mean that you can't get, or if you're already on the register, keep your PIN. If there's one, if there's one thing that that you come away from this session with us all, it is knowing that it doesn't mean that you can't get or keep your PIN, and that's why we're talking to you. Pam's elaborated and Sam's been talking about safe spaces. That's why we're really making the point around being reflective and letting us know more about your experience when you went to UNIC, because as we know now, which we didn't know before, it clearly wasn't a very nice place, and it was not what people were expecting often when they got there, and that is okay. What I must say is that we're not looking for people to say anything that isn't true, though. And it is possible that people went to the test centre and took their test fairly, and that it's possible that one or two test takers at UNIC are exceptionally fast test takers. It's not within the realms of impossibility, and if that is your case, then you would need to put forward evidence of this, that your exceptional test times, and that you would need to convince the panel, if you're a registrant, or the assistant registrar, if you're making an application, that you are one of those who can complete a test that fast. Alicia, Wendy, I'm just going to seek guidance from you both now, because there's some things that we now know and have picked up since the last webinar, and perhaps some misconceptions that we thought that we might clarify while we're here. Is now a good time to do that?
Yes, I think so. There's nothing in the chat box at all. I think I'm just looking. Yeah, sorry, so I'll hand over to Wendy. Yeah, Wendy.
That's okay, Felicia. I think colleagues are just digesting all the information, and we may probably just want to give them a bit of time to put their thoughts together and start putting it in the chat box for us. But while we're waiting for that, if you want to obviously proceed to that information, that would be good.
Thank you. And NMC colleagues, do feel free to chip in. So what else you noticed when we spoke to you last? We noticed at the beginning As I say, some potential misunderstandings, and we just thought we'd take this opportunity while we're all here to clarify those for you. So if you're hearing what we've been telling you, and perhaps, you know, it's possible that you might have been given some advice about keeping quiet about what's happened that's totally feasible, I think what we're saying now is it's probably not a good idea to do this. Like Sam mentioned, you might want to reflect on how that sits with you and sits with, you know, in accordance with the code. And you know, it's about being open and honest and transparent. So we have you know, had some indications that some people have been given advice to keep quiet, and I hope you can see from what we've been saying this afternoon that that's not always the best thing to do, and actually you know, telling us more about what happened, or showing us more evidence if you are, you know, do believe yourself to be an exceptionally fast test taker, is likely to have a better outcome for you than not saying anything at all. One thing that we've noticed, and I'll ask Pam to come in a moment and explain this, is some confusion around the different test times. And so we thought, well, we're waiting for the questions to come in. If I can just check, waiting for the questions to come in. We'll just take a moment to explain the difference between the different test times, because that might potentially answer some questions that your colleagues Wendy and Felicia might have. So Pam, if I hand over to you, and I will hand over to you, Pam. Thank you.
Thanks, Rox. So that's right, we have been seeing lots of questions and confusion in relation to test times. So I hope that the following information will give some clarity on that subject. Ordinarily, when you think about a test time, you might be thinking about how long you were at the test centre for. So considering the UNIC test centre, the NMC's case is not that the time you were physically present in the test centre before the test started is what we're concerned about. So we're not talking about, you know, the time that you arrived at the centre to the time that you left the centre, or from the time that you first sat down at the computer until you got up from the computer. So what you would initially think to be a test time is not what we're dealing with here. So in your paperwork that you may have received from the NMC in September, or perhaps if you're a registrant and you were referred to the IC in November, or if you're an applicant and you receive a contact from the NMC about an AR meeting, in those letters, you will receive a test time, which is normally to 2 decimal places. That is the time that the NMC are saying is a really quick test time. And I'm just going to break that down for you a little bit further. So that time has been calculated by an independent expert called Richard Still. The method that he's used to work out this time really is the time that you as a candidate spent answering the questions on the test. So this doesn't include any time that you might have spent reading the introduction or the intro screens or signing the non-disclosure agreements. This doesn't include any time spent at the end to complete a survey. No, what it includes is the time that you spent answering the questions in the CBT and going back and checking those answers as well. All of that is included in Richard Still's calculation. So it's very precise, is the message that we want to put forward. you may have seen in paperwork sent by the NMC a time which has been put forward by Pearson VUE. Pearson VUE, as you know, is the company who had run the CBT tests on behalf of the NMC at UNIC. Their times that they calculate is also the time spent answering the questions. However, they round up their time. Their time did not include any review time. So if you had to go back and check your answers, that wasn't included in the Pearson VUE's time. And they also included some duplication that may have occurred during the test. So that is why the NMC had commissioned the independent expert, Richard Steele, to actually take a different approach, a fairer approach to those to the calculations of the time spent on the test. So whether you're going before the investigating committee as a registrant, or whether your case is going before the AR, or as an appeal before the registration appeal panel, the time that is being relied upon is Richard Steele's time and not Pearson VUE's time, and not the time that you may have spent at the test centre not answering the questions. This same approach is what we are using for the resit times as well. So Richard Steele is applying the same method to all the tests that have been taken after UNIC. And you will be provided with that time. If you haven't already been provided with that time, that is something that we will give to you once we share the evidence bundle with you in due course. Hopefully that helps with understanding where we are in terms of the test times being quoted to you. On your screen now, you will see a helpful diagram which really explains what I've said. It's a visual of what I've just said. So
Can you increase it? Can you increase the size of the diagram? It's not very, it's quite small.
It's quite small, it is, isn't it? I don't know who's in control of that at the moment. There we go. I hope that's
that's better. Thank you.
Indeed. So if we're looking at the top of the diagram, there's that pinky purple arrow which says on the clock time. So that arrow really demonstrates how long an individual may have been at the UNIC test centre to do their test. That time, as I say, is not what we are concerned with. If you now look at the boxes below, this is it's really showing you the steps and pages that may come up in a CBT test. So the first screen you might see is the introduction. Then the following screen will be the tutorial of how to complete the test. And then there's the non-disclosure agreement process. And then there's also the survey screen as well. After that, the fifth box that you've got there in an orange colour, that is CBT question screen. So the questions that populate on your test in order to show your competence. It's really small handwriting, but the box after that is any time spent reviewing those CBT questions. That's in orange, because that is the time that we are concerned with. That is the time that Richard Steele uses as part of his calculation. And that last box there is the exit screen. So all the boxes that are in that blue colour are not included in Richard Steele's calculation. If we now look at the large box below that, which is titled PV test time. That stands for Pearson Views test time. As I said earlier, this is not the time that we're relying on, but it may sometimes crop up in the evidence bundles. But this will be a good key for you to spot which times we're not relying on. So with Pearson Views test time, they do have the two orange boxes there that we will be concerned with here. So they do include the time spent answering the CBT questions. That time is rounded up. And then the last orange box that you can see there with the red cross over it, that is a time that a candidate may have spent reviewing the answers. And so because Pearson View didn't include that in the calculations, that's not a time that we will rely on. And so that final box in grey, which is titled RS test time, that there explains the breakdown of the times that the NMC rely on to say these were really quick test times based on Richard Steele's calculations. So it includes all the time spent on the CBT questions and all the time spent reviewing those questions. Thank you for the diagram. I'll pass back to Rox now, I think.
Thank you, Pam. Just to finish off the kind of things that we've noticed that we thought that we'd clarify. There's a few other final points to raise with you, and just to be really clear with you all. So we've had some individuals talk to us about biometrics, and what we're taking this to mean is that the photo ID and digital signature, the photo ID and digital signature aren't relevant, as we know that candidates were completing this part. There's no question about whether question over someone's photo ID and their digital signature. We know that candidates arriving at UNIC completed their own digital signature and the photo ID, and then what we've come to understand and learn is that then a proxy would sit the test after that after the event. Pearson View didn't run any fingerprinting or take any other biometrics, so there was no digital fingerprinting, no palm vein technology. There was nothing like that at the UNIC test centre. There's nothing like that we can rely on in our evidence. And finally, CCTV. There wasn't any CCTV at the UNIC test centre. It wasn't the type of test centre that routinely had CCTV. And in any event, what we know is that CCTV, tends to be recorded over or wiped after a month anyway. But to be really clear, there was no CCTV at the UNIC test centre. There's a final point around recips, but I'm going to come back to Wendy and Felicia now. Would it be helpful for us to talk about resits and the value of a recit test time?
Yes, please. Yes, because I think one of the continual concerns from registrants and applicants is that they take the retest, and the retest is not always a guarantee of readmission to the register or entry to the register, and that's causing quite a number of people a lot of concern that they can't just get their heads around. So that would be really, really good.
Thank you, Felicia. So I'll start us off, Pam, and then I'll pass over to you, I think, if that's okay, to elaborate on the why taking a resit isn't simply as Felicia says, all that's needed in these cases, if that's okay. So we know that the vast majority of UNIC test takers have taken their resit, which is really good. There's no need to tell the assistant registrar or panel members that you've passed the resit. You wouldn't be getting to the point of an AR decision nor a hearing had you not have taken the resit. But if you want to, you can tell the assistant registrar if you're applying to join the register, or panel if you're a registrant already and you have a hearing, about the time that you've spent on your resit, if that's part of your case. And I'll just refer back to the point I was making earlier is, you know, if you believe that if your case is that you are an exceptionally quick test taker, you can use your resit time to help your case. Panel members may ask you questions about the resit even if you don't raise it. There are a very small number of individuals who've sat their resit in fast times. That information can go before the assistant registrar if you're making your application, or the panel if you're on the register and you're in a hearing, and that will be considered when they're reaching their decision. But it isn't the case that there are large numbers of candidates that have sat their resit test time in an exceptionally fast time that will cause us some concern. Pam, would you help elaborate on the time the time of concern and how that means that it's not simply a resit and kind of end of story? Would that be okay?
Of course, yes. Thanks, Rox. So when the NMC were investigating the concerns, everyone, I'm sure, by now are aware that update letters went out in May last year and September last year to inform all of those affected that because the NMC lost, trust in the UNIC CBT results, everybody who sat their test at UNIC had to take a new CBT test. So that's the position, and the NMC took that decision so that it's consistent and fair for everyone. So not only those individuals whose test times are of a particular concern, but even those whose test times were not in the 1 in 2,500, and I think that's an important point to raise. So because faith was lost in those results, everyone was invited to take a new test. As you mentioned, Rox, once you sit a new CBT test, you would progress onto the next stage of, if you're an applicant, the application process, or if you're a registrant, you would be still being considered by the investigating committee. The reason for that is, if you're an applicant, you need a CBT pass to actually complete your application stage. Without a CBT pass, you can't conclude your application, and you would all know that. So once the CBT is passed and you're an applicant, you can then move on to the next stages. But that doesn't address the concern that the NMC has about how the individual were able to obtain that really quick test time in any event at UNIC. It will be a positive. It's a positive thing if you've passed your resit. But as you mentioned earlier, Rox, you won't get to that stage of the application process if you haven't passed your CBT test. I mentioned earlier about the experts' method of calculation. The reason why we are sharing the resit times as calculated by the experts is because although we gave assurances last year that resit times would not be used as any further evidence of fraud,
it's still open to individuals who want to use their resit times as evidence to show the AR or show the investigating committee panel that they are a quick test taker. So for those individuals who want to do that, they have a resit time calculated in the same way as the unique original time, and the option is there for them if they want to use it or not. Exactly in the way that you said earlier, Rox. The NMC don't intend to use that evidence or use those results, but there may be circumstances where that does come up in a hearing or before an assistant registrar, because the candidate themselves, the applicant themselves, wants it to go before the AR. Or the investigating committee panel, who are independent of the NMC, may wish to see that, may wish to ask about that. So that's why we have those calculations ready. And when we share it in the evidence bundle, we don't share it with the ARs, we don't share it with the panel, because we are keeping the promises that we made that we wouldn't use that as further evidence. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Roxanne, there is, because I'm just conscious that we've got 7 minutes left, there is a question around the testing, which I think, Pamela, I think you've answered. But also, the question is said it was stated on the letter that the register will still revisit the previous application. I think you've covered some of that. So does that mean that we don't have any hope in rejoining the register in the future? So one of the things then I think has been a question from some of the people involved is if they're removed from the register or their application is not accepted, can they reapply for the register with a new application? I think we've heard that that's been a query from some of our members.
Should I that's a question and one that yes, you can reapply. You can, as an applicant, you can reapply as many times as you would like. There's no limit on how many times you can reapply. The only thing I would say is if you've been refused by the AR, you do have the option to appeal or to reapply. If you choose to reapply, have a look at the decision letter that was sent out and the reasons why the AR wasn't satisfied that the character requirements were met, and address those issues. Because if you reapply and you give the same information or there's no change in circumstances, it's likely that it would be the same decision. But absolutely, yes. And even if you have been removed from the register as a registrant, you can reapply as well, or you can appeal the decision of the panel to the county court within 28 days. If you decide not to do that, you can reapply. You can apply for readmission onto the register, and the process is exactly the same as if you were an applicant for the first time. So that process doesn't change. So you would have to give your comments, and the AR would have to consider it because concerns around unique. So that is something that will remain. But you know, it doesn't mean that if you've been removed from the register that there's no option for you to come back onto the register. And that is the case even if you give your account to say that you were involved with the fraud. That's not the end of the world, as Rox said earlier. There is still the option to come back onto the register. You can make a reapplication, provide any reflections as we spoke about before. You can provide any supporting documents that you have.
you can use the form, the guidance that from the website that's been circulated in the chat, and we have seen that to be positive.
Thank you. I think we can take another two comments in the post box. One is that there is a criticism about the NMC's role in ensuring that the testing centres were stringent and followed best practice, and how, I think in a roundabout way, how did this happen? And why wasn't there proper CCTV? And the level of frustration for applicants and registrants who went through the centre when I think perhaps they thought the centre was working according to the principles. So can you respond, please?
I can take that one. I'm trying to give a short answer to this. So the Pearson View's monitoring and data and how they were monitoring these particular types of test centres wasn't monitoring it as frequently as we would expect it to, and so there were secret shoppers. I know some individuals have asked us, did anybody go into the test site to see what was happening? The test site did have a secret shopper, which is someone that works on behalf of Pearson View to go and see them, but that was when the test centre opened, and it wasn't visited again within the time that it was open. To put it quite simply, there was these particular types of test centres were contracted out by Pearson View, and they were contracted out to places where there were high volumes of tests and where lots of tests were needed to be taken. Just to give some assurances to everybody on the screen, we don't use this type of test centre anymore. We immediately stopped testing. I can quickly noticed in one of the comments, and what have we done since, to summarise and say we're not operating in those test centres again. And if I can be really upfront with everybody, we as an organisation weren't attuned to the potential for widespread criminal activity operating at a test centre either. And so, Felicia, that's how this scenario happened at the unit test centre. A combination of less frequent checking measures on Pearson View site, and just a lack of appreciation for that type of risk as well.
Yeah, I think because many people said they wouldn't. I think the feeling is that people wouldn't have tested there, or changed their lives, and made the decision to come here if they knew that the testing centre would cause so many issues and wasn't practicing as stringently as it could be. I think so one of the questions is, okay, what is there going to be action against? So what's the action taken against the centre and perhaps Pearson View? I think that's, somebody's kind of alluded to that. But so what's the sanction so that it doesn't happen again, I think is one of the queries.
Bishop, if I can just come in, just to add to what Rox has said and answer that. So the owner of that test centre has been escalated to the relevant authorities. So I think that's important to say. I think with the benefit of hindsight, the NMC wouldn't agree to allow this model to operate in the future, which is why we've ceased this particular model. But the best intentions were to ensure equality of access globally. The NMC agreed to approve centres globally with a variety of different infrastructures, taking into account what availability of resource and infrastructure was. So I think initially it was right to approve various models of test centres. So this test centre was approved. With hindsight, as Roxanne said, the risk assessment for the opportunity for fraud didn't consider fraud to this extent at that time. Hence, the the decision now that we won't use this model where we don't have CCTV and biometrics. But the reason for allowing it in the first instance was to allow equity of access globally, because Pearson VUE are a global company that operate test centres for a variety of different academic tests. So it's certainly learning on both sides. But in response to that, we don't allow any global test centres with this model to operate. And as I say, we've escalated to the relevant authorities the concerns around this test centre owner.
Thank you. I think when we come to close, just one last comment, clarification. So I think at the beginning of this process, until the findings of the investigation, the cases were still in progress, I think there was some advice to organisations to wait for the outcome of investigations and cases, but several organisations haven't waited and have either suspended people or terminated their contracts. And so a question from the chat box is, does the NMC have any influence with organisations so that they don't do this and wait for cases to be, wait for the final outcome of cases?
I can take that one, Felicia. Thank you. I saw a couple of questions around that. So from the very start, we've urged organisations to support the nurses and the applicants to watch and wait and not take this action. The NMC can't tell employers what to do, but we can keep influencing their position, and we can have some direct conversations just to question and ask and clarify whenever we can about the process. I think this has been as confusing for some employers as it has been for everyone else, and it's as it's unfolded. If there are organisations that would feel that have been really inequitable in their approach, then my team will have specific conversations with them. So, Felicia, Wendy, if the people on the call wanted to raise any particular concerns about a particular organisation, then I'd be happy to have a follow-up conversation. But we can't directly tell an employer, you must do this or you must do that. But we'll certainly work hard to clarify positioning and to rehearse some of the conversations that we've had and that Pamela and Roxanne and Sam have outlined today. Okay.
Okay, can I hand over to Wendy to just round up and close the meeting, please?
Thank you, Felicia. Thank you to NMC colleagues as well. I know I'm reading the charts and I'm not surprised with what I'm saying. I know some people still obviously want more information in terms of what that clarity of next step looks like. And I just want to tell colleagues to go away with this information given today and review the next steps with the union. And I think we have some union on the call as well. Next week, we are hoping to meet with the RCN to be supporting you through the journey to see what can they do to work collaboratively with the NMC to start moving things forward. I know it's not been easy. The journey has been very tough, not only for you, but for us, especially at the NNC supporting you. So we are all in this together. And I think the purpose of this call, like I think I saw something in the chat, so what is new? What is the purpose? The purpose really is for the NNC to say, yes, some things have come to light, and we are now aware of some challenges that you guys went through when you did your test, and also to provide more clarity on the testing as well. I think that is a bit of a news, especially for the union or for the individuals that are supporting you through this journey. We are hoping with this meeting today, we will be able to go to the next step, whatever that looks like. But I just want to reassure you that hopefully we are really trying to turn the dial on this it's been a journey. There's no doubt about it, and everyone on this call can feel that. I can only appeal that, hang in there, advise to continue with your union, collaborate with your union, be open and honest with your union and individuals that are supporting you. And our NMC colleagues are also here, the legal team are here to say, we are happy to help through your reflective account. I think that's what I am taking away from this call. That as a nurse, using our code, the reflective account and duty of candor is very important. And we are not saying that you should lie. You are not saying that you should say what did not happen to yourself. But what we are saying is, please just have that reflective time after this meeting. Link with your union, and let's see, where that takes us to. So thank you very much, NMC team, Sam, Roxanne, Pamela, Sam. There are two Sams of the call. Sam, and also in terms of the employers, I think that's very key. It's quite a tough place to be. I remember employers actually laying them off and they're not getting the right support for, it's quite daunting actually. So I'm glad that Sam, they said that if there's any challenges, I will be liaising with you as I get any information, so we can see how we can support those individuals that are not having those employers' support. So on that note, I think we're about 8-9 minutes past the hour now. We're going to close this session and the conversation continues. Your WhatsApp group, if you remember anything you want to ask, just drop it in there and we'll pass it on to our NMC colleagues as well as to the union. But watch this space. We will put it in your WhatsApp group next week, where you'll be meeting with your RCN and other union and the legal team. So thank you very much, everyone, for taking time this evening to